Rain came sideways like it had a grudge, and I was on that curb in Portland with 2 kids, 2 trash bags, and a key that didn't work anymore. I kept saying, "We're okay," because moms do that, but Ava's thin jacket was soaked. Theo's cough had that scary rattle, and pride was no blanket then. A black sedan slowed, and a man with gray eyes didn't look past us. He looked at us, he said. His name was Evan. He had a guest house 10 minutes away, heat, hot water, a kitchen, no strings. And I wanted to say no on principle, you know what I mean. But my son coughed again, and I stepped over my pride like it was a puddle and said, "Please." That night felt like landing warm towels, soup on the stove, a note about clothes in the closet from his late wife. I locked the door and cried the quiet kind of tears, the kind that rinse off shame. Morning smelled like coffee and pancakes. And while my kids negotiated with syrup like it was its own food group, Evan slid a folder across the table and told me about the Hartley Hope Fund. Tessa started it. He kept it going after cancer, took her, and he said, "I need someone to run the day to day, someone who knows what it feels like to be up against it and still show up. You can live here until you get your feet under you. School down the hill is good. I'll cover supplies." My laugh came out wrong. Because when life goes bus stop to job offer, before your second pancake, your brain misfires, I said. "You don't know me," he said. "I know you didn't let pride keep your kids in the rain." And I said yes, small and terrified and grateful. And that yes became the hinge. Everything swung on at the fund. I wrote one rule on a Post-it and stuck it to my monitor. People first, paperwork second, then I color-coded the chaos. We moved from eligibility to empathy, from checks to check-ins. We sat in living rooms. We asked, "Where does it hurt?" The Alvarez family had 6 months of rent support and no plan. So we mapped 1 HVAC classes for Mr. Alvarez. Childcare covered, job placement ready. When he texted a picture of his certificate, I cried at my desk and paraded it like a trophy. Evan gave me space to work and showed up when it mattered. His mom, Ruth, arrived like a warm casserole with opinions, folded me into dinner without asking if I was ready. And somehow it felt right. His daughter June came home from Vermont and watched me like a goalie. Watches the puck, patient. Cautious, nothing gets by until she says it does. Saturday dinners at the main house were simple, pot roast and napkins my kids tried to fold. Fancy after dishes, Evan walked me to a rosemary and rose garden and said, "Tessa planted every inch. He couldn't come out here for a long time. Now he sits and tells her about the fund. About me, about how the house sounds different with children in it." His hand brushed mine, not a move, a pulse, and I felt it everywhere. We texted late, case updates mixed with dumb memes Ruth swore were modern. He asked about my dreams, not the sensible ones, the buried ones. I told him I dropped out of community college when Ava was born. Social work still tugged at me, he said. "Do it. I'll pay, not charity partnership," I said. "You're good at making help feel like a hand up," he said. I learned the language from Tessa, and I'm just trying not to mess up the grammar. We went on one real date, an Italian spot where the owner hugged him like a son and slipped extra tiramisu like a secret. We walked by the river after lights on the Hawthorne Bridge making the water look expensive, and under a street lamp he asked if he could kiss me without the power, the property, the complicated in the way I said yes, and everything that followed felt simple and complicated. All at once then came the twist, Cole Maddox, the old partner with a glossy smile and a handshake. That's all thumb and theater. He'd been quietly buying shares, and 3 days before the annual meeting, he called for a vote to remove Evan. He pitched the board that Evan was a widower playing philanthropist on company time. Nice guy, wrong guy, and the fund was a distraction. You could feel the room tilt when the rumor hit Slack that week. We turned the fund into a war room. Patricia ran numbers until her calculator sighed. Helen and Tom called every family we'd helped and asked for letters. Andrea printed them like medals and slid them into binders Ruth cooked like a general. June laid out a one-pager even cynics could digest in an elevator ride. Night before the vote. Evan sat in the dark office with the city pouring gold through the glass. He asked, "What if I lose?" And I said, "Then we adapt because the fund isn't a line item, it's a promise." He took my hand and said, "How did I find you in the rain?" And I said, "You stopped. That's what heroes do, they stop." The ballroom was cold enough to punish hope. Cole went first. He called kindness expensive. He called values a luxury. He said margins were thinner and made air quotes with a watch big enough to be a hubcap. Evan stood next. No theatrics, just how keeping good people costs less than rehiring. Broken ones, how ethical vendors turn into brand loyalty money can't buy, how the fund is a moat, not a leak. Profit is a byproduct of value. Our values make value. Then investors spoke. Susan Park said she read the letters in her binder and saw our name in living rooms where the lights are on because we showed up. George in tweed said he was there the day Cole wanted to slash benefits, and Evan refused and still beat forecast. And look, I wasn't going to speak boundaries and roles and all that. But when Cole called me a homeless hire with no experience, the room iced, and so did I. I stood and said, he didn't hire a stereotype. He hired a mother who knows the shape of panic in a Tuesday lobby, who can decode an insurance hold menu in her sleep, who remembers names. If that's incompetence, I hope you never need competence. The chair called the vote, and paper rustled like wind through trees. To 37. Evan Cole's smile cracked and he said, "This was mine, I built half of it." Evan said, "You built a balance sheet. We built a company that night." Ruth poured champagne into mismatched glasses. June smiled for real and asked Theo if he wanted to learn to castle Ava. Asked if we still got to stay, and Evan crouched to her eye level and said, "You were never leaving." "If I have a say under the porch light," he said. "I love you simple, like a hot mug after rain." And I said, "I love you too slow and safe, real." It didn't turn into fairy lights without friction. June and I had our library talk. She asked, "Are you replacing my mom?" And I said, "No one could. I'm here to love your dad without erasing who loved him first." We cried into a box of tissues that had no idea what it signed up for. And then she asked if she could teach Theo the Scotch opening. On Christmas morning, Evan asked my kids for permission. Before he asked me, he told them, "I'm not your dad, but I want to be permanent, the kind who never misses a recital or a sick day." Theo launched at him like a small missile. Ava said, "Can you braid hair?" He said, "I can learn, yeah." That happened. He turned to me with a ring, and I said yes, and we planned a June wedding in Tessa's garden, not to erase her, to fold her. In my mother came and cried with a kitchen towel on her shoulder, like it was a baby. Evan's vows were short. "You gave me back my home, not this place, my heart. I promised to guard the fund like a living thing, and to love June as mine, because in all the ways that count, she is." We could fade out there, right? Cake, sunlight, happy ending. But here's the part that made my hands shake. Someone dug up the security video from that first night and posted it with a caption. "Staged gold digger plays the long game." Comments came fast, like people got paid by the word. Why didn't she call a shelter like everyone else? Convenient timing. Everyone else, whose names they don't know, whose nights they didn't stand in. I stared at my phone until the letters blurred. Evan took it and put it face down. "We know what's true," he said. "You didn't game a system. You let yourself be helped. That's not manipulation. That's courage." I breathed. I believed him most days. I still do. The fund kept growing. We opened evenings for working parents. We added legal clinics. We turned 3 long-term cases into jobs that paid more than survival. And on the 1-year anniversary of that rainstorm, we planted a rosebush together. Ava said, "Real heroes stop in the rain." And Ruth said, "Tears are just love leaking out." And nobody even pretended not to cry. So tell me this, and be honest, was I wrong to say yes to a stranger with a warm car and a spare house? Or is the real wrong this idea that dignity means freezing quietly until you pass some purity test for help? Do you want the people with the most power to keep their hands clean and their hearts out of it? Or to spend where sidewalks meet storms? And what about Cole? Is he just a businessman doing business, or did he cross that line? Where profit without people makes you smaller than human. Drop your take in the comments. Argue with me if you need to tell me what you've seen with your own eyes, and if you ever found yourself judging from a distance and then learned the story under the headline, share it, because somebody out there tonight is standing under a flickering bus stoplight, deciding between pride and warmth, would you stop or drive by?